People are driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. The hiring process can be slow and overwhelming. Simplify hiring with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform. With over 350 million global monthly visitors according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/PODKATZ12. That's Indeed.com/PODKATZ12. Terms and conditions apply.
We're excited to announce that our very own podcasting platform, Zencastr, has become a new sponsor to the show. Check out the podcast discount link in our show notes and stay tuned for why we love using Zen for the podcast.
You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
You're listening to the Archaeology Show. TAS goes behind the headlines to bring you the real stories about archaeology and the history around us. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Archaeology Show, episode 150.
On today's show, we talk about Muons and the Terracotta Army, a Mesolithic baby burial, and pseudoscientific archaeological research in Jordan.
Let's dig a little deeper and then examine it with Muons. All right, welcome to the show, everybody. Rachel, how's it going?
Pretty good. We're still here in Charlotte, North Carolina, getting ready to celebrate the holidays with my family.
I mean, I feel like we've been doing a lot of celebrating, actually.
I know. It's like every other day we seem to be doing something, but that's okay. It's family time and it's fun.
Cookies and liquor. That's what the holidays are.
A lot of both of those, yeah. Yep.
All right. Well, we've got 3 articles for you today, and the first one is a little bit of a crossover from the Archaeotech podcast, where actually, if you're listening to this, the Archaeotech podcast comes out later this week if you're listening to this in real time. Mm-hmm. But if it's way to the future, then just go check it out, because Paul and I really go deep on muology.
Muology? Really?
Muology.
Is that really
Wait,
a word?
No.
Wait, is that like studying cows?
Yeah, it actually is. You know what they say when you find something that is inconclusive? It's a moo point.
Oh, cow's opinion?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
no.
Yeah.
So it's actually muography. That's right. It's mapping with muons.
Mapping with muons.
Mapping with muons.
Yeah.
So. Yeah,
we snagged this article because, well, first off, you and Paul had talked about muons, and there was an article that came out about using it for archaeology a couple weeks ago, I think. And then we saw this article that just came out recently, which is also about muons. And the title of this one is Cosmic Rays Could Unearth Secrets of Terracotta Army Tomb.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, all right, muons.
Terracotta is kind of red in color, isn't it?
Terracotta, yeah, like an orangey red. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like Muon Rouge.
Oh my God. How many of these bad jokes are we going to have to suffer through in this segment?
Which Polynesian princess could see through mountains again? Was she a princess? I don't know. Moana?
Yeah, okay. All right.
Send us your favorite Muon jokes, please.
Enough. I thought you were going to say Mulan, but Muon.
Muon. Man, I got to come up with a good Muon one.
Well, and this story does take place in China. So, all right. Well, let's talk about the Terracotta Army for a quick second. It's super famous. It's a UNESCO heritage site. So chances are you've probably heard of it before. The Terracotta Army is located at the tomb of the first emperor of China, who was called Qin Shi Huang. And I actually looked up the pronunciation of that this time, so I know for sure I've got it right. Yeah. And he was the first emperor of China, which is the Qin dynasty, the first dynasty. The
Qin dynasty is kind of at the head of the dynasties.
Oh boy! Bad,
man,
bad.
I am on it.
You've got your jokes are worse than dad jokes today. Anyway, so the Terracotta Army is this vast number of statues that are basically set up at the tomb of the emperor, and the idea was that they were there to protect the emperor in the afterlife. The tomb,
more than 8,000 of them.
Yes, yeah. There's more than 8,000 of them. Estimates include like more than 8,000 soldiers, 130 chariots, 520 horses, and 150 cavalry horses. So like it's like tons and tons of them. It's crazy how many there are. The figures themselves, they vary in height according to their roles. The tallest are generals, and then there's other figures, including warriors, the chariots, and the horses, like I mentioned. They all seem to be related to army things, but there's some others mixed into, like, I think some musicians and some other types of figures.
Yeah.
And this dates to around 210 to 209 BCE, and it's located at Mount Lee, which was known as a place of great riches in prehistory. It was known for that because they found a lot of jade there. There's some really prolific jade mines there in prehistory. And, you know, jade is very important to various dynasties and cultures in China. And then also there was gold there as well. So it was just like this place of geological riches. And of course the emperor was like, well, yeah, put my tomb there.
Yeah,
I want to be buried with the riches.
That's right. And
that is according to to a source from kind of from a contemporary source. It was somebody who was writing about a century later. So because of the closeness of that writer to the time period, it's, you know, pretty solid dating and information about the emperor. Now, when the Terracotta Army was first discovered, this would be in the 70s, a couple farmers came upon it while they were digging a well, like seems to happen a lot with archaeological resources. It was exposed in the 70s. They started excavating right away, of course, because they were like, what is this amazing thing? And the statues were all colored with beautiful painting, vibrant colors, and like fully painted, right? And then they exposed these statues to the atmosphere, and the paint immediately started curling and flaking off. And sometimes it even happened like within minutes of exposure to the air. The paint was just coming right off. So there's a lot of it that is excavated right now, though not all of it, not most of it even, but they stopped excavating because the paint was getting ruined by this exposure to air, and they wanted to figure out a way to preserve it before they uncover anymore. And technology just hasn't advanced far enough for them to have a way to discover it. So most of it is staying covered until they can, or if they can ever find a way to excavate it with preservation in mind.
So are there any other big chambers or anything that haven't been excavated yet?
Yeah, totally. So this thing like really survived history and time and looters because it is completely intact. It just remained hidden and people didn't know about it until this discovery in the 70s, which is really rather soon or recent, you know, considering big archaeological finds. The main tomb of the emperor himself is thought to be intact and completely untouched, and they know where it is, or at least they know where they think it is. And they have not excavated. They have not even attempted to excavate because they're so worried about preservation and what could happen when this tomb is unsealed. They think it's hermetically sealed and that like everything in there is probably preserved perfectly, and they just don't want to ruin anything. So because of that, enter Muons. Muons.
All right. So real quick, I'm not a physicist. We have a listener that, I mean, kind of is, and will probably take me to task for this. So I'm going to be very vague. But muons, basically, they can be generated, you know, a number of ways. But one of the ways they get into our atmosphere is from cosmic rays. Cosmic rays, I'll talk about in a second. But cosmic rays hit our atmosphere and are scattered. And one of the particles that is contained within the cosmic ray, so to speak, not really, but the cosmic ray hits atoms in the atmosphere. Things break apart. You don't need a particle accelerator. Things just happen like that. And these muons are generated. And these muons are tiny little particles, and they just travel at the speed of light, and they can be stopped by things. So they go through. They can go through solid rock, but they can also be stopped by solid rock.
Okay. Are they like flying around us right now, or is it something that you can direct? They're passing
through you immediately, like this minute.
Okay, so they're like around us all the time.
They're around us all the time.
Okay.
Yeah. So the cool thing about how they're generated, though, you know, by the intersection of these cosmic rays with atmospheric atoms is cosmic rays can come from a number of sources, and one of the sources is our own sun. But given the fact that we occupy a very tiny space in a huge 360-degree sphere around the sun, the number of cosmic rays hitting us from the sun is probably like not huge compared to the other cosmic rays that are coming from the rest of the universe.
Oh, sure. Right.
Yeah. Now, One source I read of cosmic rays could be a pretty large supernova that happened a while back, and we know where it's at, and there's a cosmic rays coming from there, so that's pretty cool. And one thing I thought that was really neat is we're using cosmic rays, muons generated through cosmic rays that were originated, thousands if not millions of years ago.
Right.
And we're using those to look inside things that are also thousands, tens of thousands, thousands and thousands of years old. So
yeah, that is cool.
Pretty neat. On the Archaeotech podcast, we talked about looking into the Pyramid at Giza, the Great Pyramid at Giza, and finding a possible hidden chamber. And how this works is they basically have a muon detector, and they don't have to shoot anything or do anything like that.
They don't have to harness them in some way. They're just already going through and around and in these things. Yeah.
So you have a muon detector that basically just sits on the other side of the thing that you want to look through. And you have to know something about how the muons are moving through that material that you're looking at. And you say, well, there's a lot of muons over here and there's not that many muons over here. So what does that mean? Not that many means they're being stopped. Are they being stopped by a solid surface, or is there, because there's a lot of them over here, they're going through a hollow surface or through a less dense medium than the rest of the thing? In the pyramid example, they're not sure if it's a chamber or it could be sand. It could be some other material. There's a construction technique that left deliberate holes, like the bricks weren't the rocks weren't completely solid inside the thing, just to reduce a little bit of the weight.
Oh, okay.
So there's a number of things it could be, but all it tells us with muography, mapping with muons, is that something's different about the space that you're looking at.
Okay.
So in the case of the tomb that we're talking about, they're trying to look inside the tomb, and but here's the thing. We don't understand what the muon mapping looks like enough to say this is definitely this. And one of the examples I brought up in the Archaeotech podcast was the Hunt for Red October. Here's our pop culture reference for the episode.
So you're 30-year-old pop culture reference, but that's right. Go on.
It was pop 80s culture, whatever. But anyway, in that movie and in submarines, they detect a new submarine, and they don't detect it by taking a picture of it. They have a sonar picture of it. Yeah. So it's just waves. And the sonar technicians look at that and they say, the computer crunches on it and says, we've seen this pattern before. It's this. Unequivocally, it's this. Not only is it this type of submarine, but it's probably this submarine, right? The engines, everything sounds so different when you have a computer look at it. It can tell, like a fingerprint, it's this submarine. Well, when they detect this new one, they have to add it to the database and then hope they can record it again and just gather more data. Same thing with ground-penetrating radar. You have to interpret using known sources and things you can verify through excavation or through just what you know is there. You get these inverted parabolas with GPR data, and the shape and intensity and depth and all that stuff. Obviously the ground makes a big difference. The strength of the GPR pushing out the signal makes a difference. The depth makes a difference, but also the object itself makes a difference.
Right.
So a burial looks way different than, I don't know, a canoe buried under the ground, something like that. So, but once you build up this library of signatures, you can understand what's going on.
So it sounds like muons won't be super useful until archaeologists start using it more to map the spaces of known places so that you can say, okay, this is definitely what stone of this type looks like, and this is definitely what empty space looks like, and this is definitely what sand looks like, and all the different medium that you might encounter inside of something under the ground. You have to do all of that before you're really going to be able to use muons to say what the inside of something looks like that you have never seen before.
Yeah, one of the things that I hope comes from this, and the thing I love about something like muons, is that we don't have to have this large power source to generate them. A large power source already generated them.
Right.
And now they're just flying all over the place. So if we can harness other particles like that and it's radiation essentially, but it's harmless radiation, right? It's passing through your meat right now.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe it causes cancer. I don't know. But
that's not everything though.
I know, right? So I just had a burrito bowl. Definitely have cancer. So anyway, it's cool, and we're getting closer and closer to like some kind of a handheld detector. We just need to get more sensitive detectors that understand what it's looking at, and you can like wave it around, and maybe even have a little thing that comes off of it to like wave it around. It could probably record at least like 3 different things, probably like body signals and things coming out of the ground and maybe atmospheric signals. So it'd be like a triple recorder, or like a tri-recorder, or like a tricorder.
Oh, like a tricorder. Wow.
I can't believe I had to get all the way to tricorder before you to understand what I was talking about.
When you got to try, I was like, wait a minute. I know where you're going with this.
I had to get all the way to try, though. Seriously.
Oh, my God. Anyway, well, that is really cool. And the thing that kind of stops me up about it is that the best that they're going to be able to do, if they were to use this tomorrow, the best that they would be able to do is probably say empty space or not, right?
I mean, it's like a tomb chamber. Don't we kind of like know there's an empty space there?
Well,
or
maybe.
We're just verifying?
I think we're probably just verifying because they've never actually excavated it. They don't know what's in there. They think it's there. And I know that they've done some tests on some other buried sites that they do know what is there. So they're trying to like get some comparison structures to see what it could potentially look like or what they might expect to see. But you can't go in with preconceived notions either, right? Like that's just... Yeah. As we'll see later in this episode, that can bring in some pseudoscience stuff when you start trying to prove the thing that you expect to see. So anyway, they're going to need to gather a lot of data, both from the tomb itself and from other places. And it's a really, really cool avenue to start going down. But I think a lot more work needs to be done with Muons themselves.
Well, and it's a good point that you made, that just proving that there is a chamber there, it gives them a little more oomph when they say we need to excavate this, because detractors might say, well, how do you know there's even something there? We're going to go through all this time and effort and money, and you don't even know if there's anything there. It could be solid rock.
Yeah, that's true.
It could be filled in with dirt.
Yeah,
something like that. So,
well, the preservation is the big thing. So if they could figure out a way to harness muons to really get a good picture of what's inside without having to excavate it, I think that would be amazing. And archaeology is so destructive, and this could be one way to like be a little less destructive with your excavation techniques.
All right. Well, we are going to move on from this and head over to Italy, baby.
Why didn't I see that coming?
Going to Italy, baby. Chris Webster here for the Archaeology Podcast Network. We strive for high-quality interviews and content so you can find information on any topic in archaeology from around the world. One way we do that is by recording interviews with our hosts and guests located in many parts of the world all at once. We do that through the use of Zencastr. That's Zencastr. Zencastr allows us to record high-quality audio with no stress on the guest. Just send them a link to click on, and that's it. Zencastr does the rest. They even do automatic transcriptions. Check out the link in the show notes for 30% off your first 3 months, or go to zencastr.com and use the code TAS.
Save on O'Reilly Brake Parts Cleaner. Get 2 cans of O'Reilly Brake Parts Cleaner for just $8. Valid in-store only at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Welcome back to the Archaeology Show, episode 150, which I didn't even call out. Like that's like
a number.
It's like centa something.
Centimedi? Medicenti?
Centa 50. And anyway.
Oh my God.
I mean, 150 episodes. Yeah, you're right. It's like, what is that? But it's still pretty cool.
Oh, it's awesome.
Yeah. So anyway, Italy, baby.
Italy, comma.
Baby. Yes.
So the next article we have is called Baby Buried with Care 10,000 Years Ago, Found in Italian Cave. Hence all the Italy baby references.
That's right. The jokes are less funny when you have to explain them.
Well, I needed it explained to me. I didn't even know what you were going for. But it was
people.
Go back to the beginning. What does it start with?
No, like people like our friend A, our Ami A. We won't use his full name, but he knows who he is. He's going to go back and he's going to like listen to my joke at the end of segment 1 and go, "Oh, Italy, baby. Now I get it." Okay,
go. Great.
Italian babies.
Italian babies. You're so dumb. So a 10,000-year-old baby burial was found in the Arma Vierana cave in the mountains of Liguria, a region in northwestern Italy. And this cave is really cool. They started excavating it in 2015 after it was actually exposed by looters. And there's evidence in this cave of human activity going back all the way back 50,000 years. I guess that would almost be like Neanderthal activity potentially too.
Yeah, it would be.
They didn't. Could be. They didn't explain some of the older activity. They were really focused on the baby burial that was found. And it was found in 2017, and it's the earliest known burial of a female infant in Europe. And they named her Neve? Neve or Neve?
Neve? N-E-V-E?
N-E-V-E. And it's in honor of the nearby river, basically. So this baby, Neve, was 40 to 50 days old when she died. And this is about 10,000 years ago, which would be in the Mesolithic? In the Mesolithic time period.
Some people say Mesolithic.
Oh, okay. Okay, so either one, whatever works for you.
So to recap, she's 10,040 days old. Go.
10,040 days old.
Well, that was when we read the article. Now she's 10,045 days old.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, that works. And she was wrapped in a shroud that was adorned with more than 60 beads and 4 pendants, all of which were made out of shells.
Okay.
Also nearby was an eagle or an owl talon, and it might have been like an offering or a gift or something that she was buried with. They didn't say what they meant by nearby, so I don't really know exactly how close it was, but it was close enough that they feel like it might be associated. So this is a really unique burial for a bunch of different reasons, partly because it's incredibly well preserved, and infant bones are not usually so well preserved because they're so fragile, so small, they're not fused yet, there's a lot of cartilage. So
remember that infant we found at that excavation in Miami?
I do.
I think that was an unborn child, was it not?
I don't remember.
Like prenatal?
It was tiny. It was very tiny. It might have been.
Yeah.
Might have been.
Crazy. I don't know what it dated to because we don't get that information when we're excavating.
No, because they're...
Yeah,
because it's a CRM excavation. They don't tell you anything like that.
Yeah.
You just get the stuff out of the ground.
But that was crazy.
Yeah. Super, super tiny. These were super tiny bones, obviously, as well. Now, the baby was 40 days old. But when they're that young, you can't use the bones to determine sex like you can kind of with an adult. It's not
it's all
100%. But
the same thing.
Yeah, but those bones are just too small and they're not developed enough. So you just can't tell. However, because of the excellent preservation, they were able to extract DNA out of the bones and test it. And then they determined that she was, in fact, female. So I thought that was really cool. You don't usually get that kind of information out of a burial this old, for sure. Now, the other interesting thing about this, and kind of makes it sort of doubly rare, is that there just aren't a lot of burials for this time period. So you get a fair amount of adult burials before 14,000 years before present. They're somewhat common, not super common because, 14,000 years ago, but they're somewhat common. But then there's this gap in the 10 to 11,000 years ago range, which is the early Mesolithic time period, where you just don't find a lot of burials. And I don't know if it's because the people themselves just weren't doing a lot of burials that can be found by archaeologists today, or what was going on there, but it's just not something that is found a lot. Maybe it has to do with the geologic issues going on at the time, ice ages or something maybe were causing burial issues. I don't know. There could be a lot of reasons why you don't find a lot.
Yeah, they would have been pulling out of the last ice age at that point, but I would imagine that was a time of climatic instability.
Yeah,
as that was going on. So who knows? Yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of what makes this doubly rare, having it be an infant that is female, and then also from this time period where it's pretty rare to have burials at all. And the thing that the researchers were most excited about with this burial is that it sort of reflects the infant's treatment as a full person by these early Mesolithic hunter-gatherer cultures that she was part of, even though she was only 40 to 50 days old. The items buried alongside her really indicate significant emotional investment into such a tiny being that was so young.
Yeah.
And I think it's really easy for people today to look at hunter-gatherer, the caveman trope and think that they didn't care much about their babies. But this burial clearly shows that there was a lot of care and a lot of love that went into her burial.
Well, and the other thing is we always, tend to assume in general terms, because of the difficult nature of living in that kind of time period, and to be honest, because of the difficult nature of living in any time prior to city-state environments, that people prehistorically, people even historically, and people practicing certain religions today will just have as many children as they can because today it's more of a religious mandate. You will, go forth and prosper,
proliferate,
and you will have as many kids as God wants you to have. But back in the day, before that kind of religion dictated that, it was more of a survival thing. Like they knew they had to have kids to survive. That was pretty obvious. And kids, I mean, it's difficult to raise a naked, screaming human baby in the middle of nowhere, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, how do you do that? So
Totally.
if there happened to be, when the child was born, if there happened to be some really bad storms, it was really cold, maybe born in the winter, maybe it was just sick, who knows, or she was just sick, but it was just a really hard thing. But this tells me that maybe in this time period, if they're not finding a lot of burials, maybe the populations were really small. And if the populations were really small because of, maybe there's not enough food, animals are gone, whatever the case may be, maybe families were smaller and people were having fewer children,
right,
for whatever reason. So if they're having fewer children, then they're probably going to be super sad when one of them dies.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that there's also an impression that women were just popping out babies one after another, after another, after another. But that kind of behavior doesn't really come along until
Christianity.
Yeah. And probably in the last 500 years or so, when a woman could do that because they would employ a wet nurse to feed their baby. This is in the higher class society. Obviously, not lower class women wouldn't have been able to afford to do this. But that's the only way that a woman's body could even have children one after another like this, because while you're breastfeeding, your body just most of the time won't get pregnant again. Yeah. So it sort of functions as built-in birth control. I'm sure there were times where it didn't work and women still got pregnant and had babies close together. But breastfeeding does do that to some extent, biologically speaking. So they probably were only having babies once every 3 years or so, which is a bigger time frame than even it is today sometimes. So, man,
as a side note, can you correlate closer births in the last 80 years to the development and acceptance of formula?
Maybe that would be a really interesting study to see. Yeah. Because the wet nurse thing was up into the 1800s maybe, and then it sort of fell out of fashion. I'm speaking without having actual knowledge here, so don't crucify me if I'm wrong. But I'm just from what I've read, from histories and various things online, that sort of fell out of fashion. But then, formula in the last 50, 80 years has definitely taken the place of breastfeeding for a lot of women. So,
Well, the cool thing about the beads and the pendants that the baby was found with was that there were really well-worn wear patterns on these things.
Yeah.
So clearly worn by, obviously, an adult at some point for a long period of time. And then more than likely, I mean, a baby wouldn't have worn that kind of thing when they were alive. They would have been too small. But it was clearly special enough that this person said, you know what, I'm going to take this thing that's really special to me and bury it with this, bury it with my child.
Which is just so sweet and just shows how important that baby was to whatever adults had to go through the grief and process of burying her. So the other interesting thing is that there was some carbon and nitrogen analysis of the baby's teeth. I guess the teeth are in there already, even though they wouldn't have erupted yet, but they were able to, the teeth were still there with the remains, and they were able to analyze them and find out that her mother had a land-based diet. So that's one interesting thing. And also that the baby experienced some stress in utero at some point before she was born because her teeth stopped growing. And I guess that's something that will happen if the mother experiences stress of some sort, things won't develop properly or could not develop properly in the baby. And in this case, her teeth stopped growing.
Sounds like this baby came out kind of doomed to failure.
Well, yeah. I mean, if her teeth weren't growing properly, maybe, the mother could have experienced, starvation or something while she was pregnant. And it just meant that this baby wasn't going to make it. But anyway.
New restaurant idea. Land-based foods.
Land-based. I think it needs to be called land-based diet.
Land-based. That's all it's going to be.
Just land.
Land.
Just land.
Land. Yes.
So hipster.
Nice. All right. Well, that was pretty cool. I mean, it sucks for the little baby, but I'm glad that they took such care in burying her.
I know.
So we could learn some more.
It's sad and sweet all at the same time because it's nice to see that a culture 10,000 years ago was still treating a baby that passed away with the same reverence and the same grief that humans today would. It just makes that human connection between us and our ancestors.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go from there and talk about biblical clickbait.
Yes, let's.
Back in a minute. You may have heard my pitch for membership. It's a great idea and really helps out. However, you can also support us by picking up a fun t-shirt, sticker, or something from a large selection of items from our TeePublic store. Head over to archpodnet.com/shop for a link. That's archpodnet.com/shop to pick up some fun swag and support the show.
People are driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. The hiring process can be slow and overwhelming. Simplify hiring with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform. With over 350 million global monthly visitors according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/PODKATZ12. That's Indeed.com/PODKATZ12. Terms and conditions apply.
Is your vehicle stopping like it should? Does it squeal or grind when you brake? Don't miss out on summer brake deals at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Welcome back to the Archaeology Show, episode 150. And I want you to imagine for a moment that you're listening to a 1940s newsreel announcer going, "This just in. Comet strikes down ancient city of Sodom and Gomorrah. Archaeologists stunned." That's the kind of clickbaity crap that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, it is.
That's like early clickbait before you could even click. It's watch bait.
It's read bait.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this article is called "When Biblically Inspired Pseudoscience and Clickbait Cause Looting." So, I'm going to just go ahead and point out that title right there is like a little bit clickbaity. Mm-hmm. But in this case, I'm okay with it because this is an article written by 3 archaeologists who work in the Jordan area, basically critiquing a paper that was published back in September. It's a peer-reviewed open access paper that proposes evidence that the city of Tal el Hammam was destroyed by an asteroid, making it likely the city of Sodom from the Bible, like the city that Sodom is based on. This paper that was published back in September was in Scientific Reports, which is basically a peer-reviewed subsidiary of Nature magazine, and it's open access and anybody could read it. We're not going to link to that paper in our show notes because we just don't want to give it more clicks. Yeah, we don't need to give it more clicks, and what we're about to talk about is why everything in that paper is pseudoscience. So here we go. So the basic story of Sodom from the Bible is, I don't even know what it is. I'm not even going to pretend. There's some stuff happens and the town is destroyed by stones and fire sent from the sky. Well,
it's basically a town that, according to the Bible, was full of sin and
yeah, needed to be punished.
It's like where the word sodomy comes from.
Yes,
So
Sodom and Gomorrah are always together. There's stuff that happens there. I don't know. I grew up Catholic, but I don't remember any of this crap.
It's like Reno and Sparks. Sacramento, San Francisco. You know what I mean? It's like 2 cities that are just riddled with sin.
Yes, lots of sin, destroyed by stones and fire sent from the sky. And the so-called researchers, they approached the dig at Tal el Hammam with the perspective that we think that this is the city of Sodom from the Bible. So let's figure out how to prove it.
Yep.
That's basically how they approach that dig. And it's just such a wrong and such a bad approach. You can't go in with that idea. It's not objective, and it allows pseudoscience to really gain traction in the public, especially when you do all of this research and then have clickbaity, outcomes and publishings from it. So
yeah, I don't think as a researcher you can figure out what kind of clickbaity articles you're going to have. Mm-hmm. The problem that this paper has out of Sapiens is like the authors themselves were a little clickbaity in what they were doing, you know, and titling the article and how they talked about it. But the press is always going to put clickbait titles on there. So you can't really get rid of that, but you can at least have a solid basis of evidence.
Yeah.
So when people go read it,
you can have good science. Clickbait, I think, is totally legit when you're linking to good science, because you do want people to read what you're doing. And I think the problem here is that scientific reports did not do a good enough peer review job. I don't know who the peers were that reviewed this, but they clearly let this sneak by. It was picked up by Smithsonian and Sapien, who is the publisher of this rebuttal article. Sapiens themselves had an article published at the time that this paper came out.
Yeah, that it's interesting that they mentioned that in this article. They're talking about the original one.
Yeah. So,
and in fact, they link to it, but it also says related to on the bottom that pulls stuff naturally,
does it?
like through their algorithm, and it's like right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, which was the original article in Sapiens was written by somebody on the big research team that originally did this. Not the original authors, but the big research team. But it's also like a guy that I kind of know.
Oh, and really?
He works at a university in the South, but also he worked at he might still for a CRM firm. You know, and I've met him at conferences and stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, this research was in the paper was it got spread around Twitter. Like, it was pretty sensationalized. Lots of news outlets picked it up. Smithsonian did, Sapiens, like I already mentioned. And the news titles that they were using at the time were things like a giant space rock demolished an ancient Middle Eastern city and everyone in it, possibly inspiring the biblical story of Sodom.
That's right.
So there's your clickbaity headline there. Of course, all people, especially Christians who love to see proof of Bible stories played out in archaeology. So it just got a lot of steam. Now, as soon as it hit the airwaves, airwaves, the internet waves, experts quickly began picking apart the science. There's a couple things that they mentioned specifically in the article, and we'll just go through them very quickly. Physicist Mark Boslow, he's an expert on asteroid collisions and airbursts. He picked apart all of the bad science associated with the supposed asteroid that hit the city. So that was the first thing that was not good. Yeah,
and Elizabeth Bick, a microbiologist and scientific integrity consultant, concluded several photos of the dig sites appear to contain cloned parts, small areas that appear to be visible multiple times within the same photo. She questions the reasons behind the photographic alterations. So they're like doctoring photos.
Yeah, they're like photoshopping things into the photos where they want them to be.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
You know, related to the asteroid airburst real quick, the first couple paragraphs of the article in Sapiens, written by Chris Moore, it's right there at the bottom of this article if you're looking at it, he goes through this narrative of explaining that and how it happened and what almost from a first person account type of thing. It's almost like reading a Brian Fagan book. He just goes into this prehistoric thing and then his third paragraph or whatever it is like, that's how it seems to have probably gone and blah, 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 like this. So he starts out the article in Sapiens by saying, basically, this is what we're going to go prove right now. You know, that all these things happen.
Yeah, they just had this idea in their head and they were figuring out how to prove it.
Yeah, and he also says, you know, they found things like melted pottery, melted metal, these melted things, and the intensity and heat of the airburst and the comet exploding, asteroid exploding, is what they're saying caused this. But before he says that, they're like, you know, we've looked at volcanoes, we've looked at earthquakes, and we've looked at other stuff, and none of that can cause what we've seen here. And I'm like, you telling me volcanoes can't cause melting of things?
Yeah, right.
Like, you know,
I mean, anyway. Any kind of fire ever can do it. So I'm just
we've seen I mean, obviously metal and other things melt in just forest fires.
Yeah,
forest fires can get incredibly hot.
Yeah, definitely. So the next bit of data that has been disproven by experts is by biological anthropologists Megan Perry and Chris Stantis. They analyzed the interpretation of the human remains from this site. They disagreed with the interpretations, number one, and they noted that the examination of these remains were carried out by a medical doctor, not a trained bioarchaeologist.
Yeah.
And there's so many things to know about bones that a medical doctor might not actually know. I mean, they know what the bones are, but they're not trained in what happens to the bones after they decompose, after the body decomposes away, and what the bones might go through post-mortem, right? So it's just, you've got to have a bioarchaeologist look at human remains to draw conclusions about it.
Yeah, and then anthropologist Matthew Bollinger identified pretty big flaws with the radiocarbon dates, and basically the dates reported reflect the assumption that all the carbon-14 dates must represent a single event and not a test of whether the dates actually do represent a single event.
So they just assumed that they were all the single event and didn't look at it from any other perspectives. Right. Yeah, so all of these things, plus there's more, but those were the main ones that were talked about in this article. It was just showing that the findings were made to fit the hypothesis.
Yeah.
And these critiques have been brought up to the project director, a guy named Stephen Collins. He's the project director at Tal El Hammam and his team. And he says basically the exercise of proving Tal El Hammam is Sodom is the entire point of the endeavor. He is very open about that being what they were trying to do with these excavations.
Well, and that's not super uncommon either.
Yeah.
Somebody's got written evidence or research or something that says, hey, I think something is over here. They're going to go to the place and try to find the thing. I mean, trying to find the lost city of Troy has been exactly like that.
That's true.
Poring over historical accounts that say that's there. What about Atlantis? People have specifically gone, because it was mentioned historically, people have specifically gone to places to say, I'm going to find Atlantis here.
Yeah.
And that's what they're trying to do. So that in itself doesn't alert me to something. But when you try to take every single piece of evidence and cram it into your narrative of the story, that's where it's wrong. If you can't say, you know what, turns out this probably isn't right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there were some other concerning things about the project in general. Like, much of the work is carried out by volunteers who actually pay a lot of money to be on the dig. Now, that by itself would not be too concerning, because there's things like Earthwatch where people pay money to be on these digs. So
I did one of those.
So that's fine. Yeah, exactly. And you had a great experience. So that's not by itself concerning. But also the fundraising efforts for the project have targeted people in groups who fear a post-Christian world and want to prove stories in the Bible with archaeological evidence.
Yeah, and I saw some other stuff in an article where people, I hate to say it, but Christians were really excited to be digging or something in Sodom and Gomorrah, not just because of the biblical relevance, but because of the insane nature of it, like the sin and all that stuff that was there, and just kind of like being around it. And I'm like, man, it is always those people that are most into it. Yeah,
it just seems to be pretty sensationalized. And the research team now, and I don't even know if I totally fault them for this. You got to get money for your research how you can and where you can. So maybe they were taking advantage of these Christian groups that wanted to prove that this place from the Bible existed. The problem is that the researchers themselves clearly held the same viewpoint, and they were trying to prove it.
Yeah.
So the result here, right? There's a lot of clickbait. It kind of caught the attention of the media and the general public outside of academia. They saw this clickbait story about the poorly executed dig, but they didn't know how poorly executed it was. And it just puts more pseudoscientific ideas out there about this place. And academia is fighting back with stories like this one, but it's just kind of too late, because somebody who read that article back in September might not see this. They're not going to see this. So they don't even know that the science was bad and that it's not true. It's just not true. Yeah.
And of course, the other byproduct of this, when you claim to have found something that has a famous pedigree, looters are going to go try to find stuff from it too.
Yeah.
Looting, we've talked about this in Pompeii. Looting in Pompeii is just running rampant because people try to find artifacts. They dig into the side, and there's a lot of Pompeii unexcavated. But anytime you find something that, again, very historically relevant, potentially, you're going to have looters coming in, and this spawned a bunch of looters.
Yeah, for sure. And the whole area really is rife with looting, because there's lots of cemeteries along the Dead Sea, and those are all kind of associated with biblical locations. In the minds of people, whether or not that's actually true is always up for debate. And there's this cool project called the Follow the Pots Project. And what it does is it tries to trace illegal looting, and it traces it from the moment of the illegal loot, the transportation of it internationally somewhere, and then the goods are laundered there somehow, and then they become legitimate, and they are legitimately sold to collectors who want something from the time of Jesus.
Yeah.
So this looting and then laundering of the goods, it's erasing the archaeological context of them. Obviously, when you pull them out, like you lose your archaeological context. You're digging into somebody's grave to take these things. Yeah. It's so disrespectful to the people and the ancestors of that area. It's like destroying the cultural resources. Looting is. So yeah, it's just terrible. And I don't know, I guess the whole thing just leaves such a bad taste in my mouth because it's leading to looting. It's claims that are incorrect about places in the Bible. I think it's pretty well shown that a lot of the stories from the Bible have origins in oral histories and oral stories of the people from the time period and in the place that they created to explain other things. And if we could just accept that the places in the Bible came from stories and oral histories from the people who lived in these areas and stop trying to find real places to represent the places in the Bible, then it would just be so much better for the archaeological resources in Jordan and in other places like this.
I know people are so, I don't think racist is actually the right word too, because you want something from the time of Jesus? I'll get you an Elko quarter notch point. You know what?
Yeah, that's the time of Jesus, technically.
It is. Totally.
Yeah.
So,
well, time and place then, I guess. Let's be specific. But but you're right though. Like this is a racist thing, or it's
we'll get them a piece of a redwood from California. Those were also the time of Jesus.
I know. I like lose my words over it because I get so mad. But yeah, like I don't think most people in Jordan are Christian these days, so they're happy to profit off of the white Christians on the other side of the world, white and black Christians, whatever color Christian you are, but to take advantage of them and sell looted goods. But gosh, it's not good for the archaeological resources of our world.
We can't really stop finding cool archaeological stuff that might have a historical context, right? Especially in places like Jordan that have a 5,000 year written history.
Yeah.
So we are going to find things that were mentioned and that are cool and famous, and we should publish about those. It's to me, looting comes down to more about educating people. But to be honest, the people that are looting, they're not necessarily high-priced antiquities dealers. It might end up in their hands, but the people who are looting are the ones that are starving and need food in their,
they just need to feed their families.
It's just one more way for them to earn money. So, it goes back to partly education, but they don't care about that when it comes down to, ancient pot or bread. But also, I guess better programs for them so they don't have to loot to survive.
Well, yeah, to be clear, I don't blame the people doing the looting really at all. I think you're right. I think they're just trying to feed their families. It's the collectors who are creating the market that want to buy these things. If the market didn't exist, then the looters wouldn't have that as an option. So
yeah, part of what saved the African elephant when they were, just killing it en masse for the ivory was the successful thing to do, not only just sacrificing a bunch of ivory and burning it, because ivory burns weirdly, but not doing that. But that did do part of it, obviously. But then it just made the stuff that was out there even more rare and precious. But they made it illegal.
Yeah.
And the tough thing about antiquities is it's tough to make all that stuff illegal because you're talking about literally everything in prehistory. And it's like, how do you even know, first off?
Yeah.
And then, I don't know, it's crazy.
And then is archaeology illegal? Like you can't really make doing the science part of it illegal.
Yeah.
I guess you could if you could try. It just, I don't know. That doesn't seem like the right way to go. So I don't really know. I mean, it would be great if it could start at the collector level and have people stop wanting to own these things. Yeah. But I don't see that happening either. So,
well, speaking of Christians and loot, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays for anybody listening to this.
Yeah, definitely. This is coming out the week before Christmas. So yeah. Actually, the whole reason I even grabbed onto this topic is because I was like, oh, I wonder what kind of archaeological evidence there is for Christmas. And I started looking into it. Pseudoscience, everything, everywhere. It's just like...
Yeah, we actually talked about doing something like that, but then it's like, do you talk about Saturnalia? Do you talk about, the origins of putting up a tree and decorating it? There's so many things you could go down. And to be honest, once you start doing the research, the primary thing that you find are compilation articles from years past where people have already done that.
Yeah, so, yeah. And it leads to a lot of crap from people who have made a name for themselves by drawing their own conclusions about archaeological digs, which is not what we want to do.
Indeed. Well, whatever you celebrate, have a happy holiday season, and we've got one more episode coming before the new year, and we will see you then.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to The Archaeology Show. Feel free to comment and view the show notes on the website at www.archpodnet.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at ArchPodNet. Music for this show is called I Wish You Would Look from the band Sea Hero. Again, thanks for listening and have an awesome day. This episode was produced by Chris Webster from his RV traveling the United States, Tristan Boyle in Scotland, DigTech LLC, Cultural Media, and the Archaeology Podcast Network, and was edited by Chris Webster.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.
Thanks again for listening to this episode and for supporting the Archaeology Podcast Network. If you want these shows to keep going, consider becoming a member for just $7.99 US a month. That's cheaper than a venti quad eggnog latte. Go to archpodnet.com/members for more info.
Save on O'Reilly Brake Parts Cleaner. Get 2 cans of O'Reilly Brake Parts Cleaner for just $8. Valid in-store only at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Is your vehicle stopping like it should? Does it squeal or grind when you brake? Don't miss out on summer brake deals at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.